Deep in the heart of the Hercynian forest, the air is thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Here, the canopy is so dense the sun hasn't touched the forest floor in a century. There are no roads, signs, or maps. A scout of a Germanic tribe stands at the edge of a sunless ravine. Behind him, 5,000 of his kinsmen, elders, children, and livestock waiting for his signal. To an outsider, this is a green prison. To the Germanic traveller, it is a map. The scout reaches out, touching the bark of an ancient oak. He feels the thick moss on its northern flank. He spots a mountain peak through a break in the leaves, and he knows exactly where the river fords lie, 3 days' march to the west. He isn't wandering. He is reading the living skin of the world. Modern history often calls these people barbarians who stumbled across Europe by accident. They're wrong. They possessed a navigational intelligence that makes a modern GPS look like a toy. They didn't need to pave the earth to understand it. They were part of it. How did a people without a single scrap of parchment navigate an entire continent with surgical precision? Today, we're uncovering the lost navigation of the North. I invite you to step into the deep woods with me. Leave the maps behind. Our journey begins now. The myth of the wild wanderer. When we think of the Great Migrations, the Völkerwanderung, we often imagine a desperate, disorganized scramble. We picture tribes fleeing Huns or climate shifts, bumping into the Roman frontier like a blind man hitting a wall. But the archaeological reality tells a much more impressive story. Their movement was rarely a random wandering. It was a purposeful, calculated migration guided by a sophisticated understanding of the landscape. To the Germanic tribes, the Cherushi, the Suebi, the Saxons, and the Franks, the concept of wilderness didn't exist. To them, the land was a book, and every ridge, stream, and stand of timber was a sentence they had learned to read since birth. They understood that the earth has an anatomy. They didn't need a road to tell them where to go because they understood the flow of the land. They knew that water always finds the easiest path, and if they followed that path, they would find the way. The liquid highways, rivers, and coastlines. If you are moving an entire tribe with heavy wagons and livestock, your greatest ally isn't a path, it's a river. Rivers were the primary superhighways of the Germanic world. The Elbe, the Rhine, the Danube, and the Weser provided something a forest could not, a constant, unwavering direction. By following the flow of the water, a tribe could maintain their orientation for hundreds of miles. But the river was more than just a compass. It was a lifeline. It provided water for the cattle, fish for the pot, and a clear break in the dense forest that allowed for faster travel. However, navigating a river isn't as simple as walking beside it. You had to know the fords. A ford is a shallow point where the riverbed is firm enough to support the weight of a wagon. These locations were the most valuable secrets in the Germanic world. They weren't marked on maps, they were passed down through generations. To know the fords of the Rhine was to hold the power of life and death over a migrating people. If you missed the ford, you were trapped against the water, vulnerable to ambush. When they reached the coast, the logic of the river continued. Germanic sailors practiced cabotage, a coastal navigation. They didn't sail into the empty blue, they hugged the shoreline, memorizing every headland and the color of the water. They watched the behavior of seagulls and gannets. If a bird flew toward the horizon with a fish in its beak, it was heading for its nest, meaning land was near. The Great Vault. Sun and star tracking. When the trees cleared or the ships left the coast, the Germanic tribes looked to the high map, that is, the sky. Long before the magnetic compass reached European shores, these people were master astronomers. During the day, the sun was their primary guide. They understood the sun's arc. They knew exactly how high the sun should sit at midday during the winter solstice versus the summer solstice. They used the shadows cast by a simple stick, a gnomon, to determine their latitude and ensure they weren't drifting during long migrations. But the night was where their skill truly shone. They looked for the nail of the heavens, the North Star. Because the North Star remains relatively fixed while the rest of the constellations rotate around it, it served as a permanent beacon. By keeping this star at a specific angle over their shoulder, a warrior could maintain a straight line through a pitch-black forest or across a featureless moor. This wasn't just survival, it was geometry in its most primal form. Before we move into the oral maps these tribes used, I have to ask, if you were dropped in a forest today using only the sun and the trees, do you think you'd make it? Let me know in the comments what your survival strategy would be. Reading the earth. Environmental cues. To the Germanic mind, the landscape was filled with biological markers. While others looked for milestones, a Germanic scout read the vegetation. They knew certain trees, like willow or alder, only grow near water. Seeing them in the distance signaled a hidden stream. They also practiced wind reading. In the north, prevailing winds caused trees to grow lopsided, a phenomenon called flagging. By observing the lean of the branches, they determined direction even under total cloud cover. Even the soil spoke to them. A shift from rich loam to sand signaled an approaching coast or river basin. These were data points in a mental map updated in real time. Oral tradition, the map made of words. How do you pass on a 500-mile route without writing? You turn geography into a story. In Germanic culture, the skald was as vital as the warrior. They composed rhythmic poems that were actually technical manuals disguised as sagas. A poem might describe an iron peak at sunset or a weeping meadow where the ground turns to marsh. By memorizing the verse, the youth memorized the route. If a traveler reached a landmark but missed the next one described in the song, they knew they had strayed. These song lines created an invisible network of roads across the continent. The human compass. Experts and scouts. No tribe moved blindly. They relied on eyes, specialized scouts and veterans who had traveled the empire and returned with a professional understanding of geography. These men rode days ahead, looking for signatures like deer tracks, which lead to the easiest mountain passes. They left behind cairns, small stone towers. These were not just piles of rock. The specific placement of the top stone or a notched stick pointed the following tribe toward the safest valley. This communication allowed massive groups to bypass dead ends and treacherous marshes already identified by the scouts. The Viking edge, sunstones and compasses. In the north, where fog swallows the sea, the Nordic tribes used the sunstone. This polarizing crystal pinpointed the sun's location even through heavy overcast, allowing them to use sun compasses when the sky was invisible. This technology enabled them to strike out across the Atlantic, reaching North America centuries before the rest of Europe dared to leave the sight of land. The paths before roads. It's a common mistake to think the Germanic lands were totally pathless. While they didn't have paved roads, the land was covered in folk paths and wagon tracks. These were paths of least resistance, worn into the earth over thousands of years by migrating animals like the aurochs and deer. The tribes followed these ancient tracks because the animals had already found the safest way. They used ridgeways, paths that stayed on the high ground of hills to avoid the dangerous swamps and thick undergrowth of the valleys. These paths were well known to all the local tribes, creating a secret network of soft roads that allowed for rapid movement without the need for a single paving stone. The wisdom of the wild. The Germanic tribes didn't survive because they were lucky wanderers. They thrived because they were masters of their environment. They didn't see the absence of roads as a barrier, they saw the entire earth as their road. They found their way by listening to the rhythm of the rivers, memorizing the songs of the stars, and trusting the wisdom passed down from their fathers. They proved that you don't need a map to know where you are going, you just need the courage to look at the world as it truly is. The next time you look at a GPS, remember the people who crossed an entire continent using nothing but the moss on the trees and the nail of the heavens. They didn't just find their way, they carved a path for history itself. If you found this look into ancient survival insightful, subscribe to Germanic Arc for more deep dives into the lives of our ancestors. Don't forget to comment below which navigation method surprised you the most. We'll see you in the next one.